Our next conversation is an interesting one because it's around the monthly JobSpeak Index, the report that Naukri.com puts out and gives us a sense of what is happening with hiring overall. Chintan Thakkar, the Executive Director and Group CFO, Info Edge, is joining us to speak more on it. Mr. Thakkar, great to have you back on the show, and a pleasure as always to speak with you. Just let's start by outlining the overall contours. 2% growth year on year in this period, and you've taken October and November together. Festive period usually slow for jobs and hiring. But what struck me is that you have degrowth in some key sectors, in retail, in banking, in IT and IT services.
Yeah. So traditionally, these are the growth sectors, particularly from the white collar job standpoint. And if you see past few quarters, there have been concern around IT especially. But like I have always been saying, that it still looks to us that we are getting out of that U-curve recovery. And although yes, I agree that November IT index doesn't look great, but if you take October, November, it is still kind of flattish. I would really want to wait for December to kind of really see how that is trending. It's quarterly index which will give us a much better trend of what's happening in those sectors.
But then since we are looking at this entire space, and you're saying overall hiring up 2%, white collar hiring up 6% year on year in festive season, let's talk about some of the spaces which are growing. And non-IT fresher hiring seems to be the big positive.
Yeah, I think fresher hiring after a long time, it is kind of showing up as a positive trend, and which is a great news for many youngsters. And overall, it kind of shows the momentum, because that's the entry level where the hiring is happening. So I think that's the kind of build the funnel for the employment. So I think that's good news. Also, pharma is growing. Overall, healthcare is growing. Right. So some of the other sectors that those are growing are also very encouraging sign. Overall from the employment segment.
Chintan, good morning. Neeraj here. To your mind, because this is not just a month phenomenon, but you would have, it also follows, it also shows patterns, right, over a period of 6, 12, 18, 24 months. I'd love to know what is your key takeaway, one, of the recent note that has come in, but two, also, if this has any takeaway of a trend that you might have observed for the latest one and the few before that.
Certainly, great question. I would think that when I look at the patterns of how the index is moving, and particularly when you look at the white collar, job, English-speaking job segment, in the past we have always seen that with the growth in economy, you have always seen that IT is growing at least equal to that, or maybe faster than that. I think certainly, it's what is changing is that the non-IT for past, almost like 2 years, we have seen that the non-IT seems to be growing much faster than IT segment. This kind of shows a structural shift in how the economy is growing, and it's the non-tech sector that seems to be doing much better than what the tech sector has been doing, which has not been there for past decades. So I think that's certainly a new trend, and that's a very interesting trend, and that's why the tier 2 towns, tier 3 towns, I think those towns are showing a much better growth in overall economic activities.
And the other aspect is when we speak to some of the IT companies, right, for a lot of global places where they are present, there's a very large local workforce that is taking shape there because of political compulsions or what have you, or cost factors as well. Could it well be the case that, unlike what may have happened in the past, over the next few years, even if Indian IT sector grows and grows in a very strong fashion globally, there may not be a commensurate 1:1 increase in job creation by Indian IT services sector back home in India?
Well, although the observation is very correct, and that leads to the conclusion that you are trying to draw, but the converse also one needs to look at it, is that there is a lot more GCCs, the global capacity centers, which are coming up into India. So many of those companies, and I'm not talking about the top class companies, but even the middle, which are into multi-billions, but they are still middle so far as the US economy is concerned. They all are coming and setting up their shops in India. And that is increasing, and if you look at, even from the index standpoint, I think that's the part which is growing. So although in general IT may not be growing, but certain pockets of IT, including GCCs, seem to be growing at much faster rate, and that might kind of offset the trend that you mentioned.
But yeah, so Chintan, sorry, just one small addition there. So, but the GCCs are not part of IT services per se. Yes, tech sector, but not IT services. So, do you kind of bifurcate the two when you do this JobSpeak Index, or is it all combined as one, and therefore one needs to kind of read between the tea leaves?
Yeah, I think it's a subsegment of of that. And yes, I agree that GCCs could not necessarily only be the IT services. It could be a much bigger phenomenon. But largely, the first entry point is usually the IT services for all the GCCs.
Chintan, just another very interesting thing that I noticed is that experience is back in vogue. The demand for those with more than 16 years of experience is up 14%. So yes, good time for freshers, but that's also telling us about maybe two ways of looking at it: deepening of the job market, and also that volumes are not that huge. Because if you're hiring in large volumes, you're going to hire more freshers. Is that a fair takeaway?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the fact that the freshers are growing and the fact that at the top level, there is a growth, it kind of shows that there is a depth in the market. And yes, I do agree that at mid level there seems to be a little bit squeeze. But as I said earlier, we would want to see the trend line for a couple of more months to really kind of make a case out of that.
Your Gujubai will eventually.
Yes, I think it will, because that is what is driving the economy as well. I'm a proud job creator out here, and Chintan Thakkar will agree with me out there. But Chintan, the language barriers notwithstanding, the other small question that I have is there a predictability aspect to something like this? I mean, when you came out with the last job report, was there a predictability aspect that you could that could come out of it, maybe intuitively or otherwise? Did it hold true? And therefore, the latest index release that has, yes, it looks back. Does it have a predictability aspect as well?
Yeah, given the trend line, we can have some element of predictability over there. And the November index is more or less, it's in the range of the prediction that we have, and that's why we are saying that we would still want to wait for December, because we do still hold the view that by December this would look even brighter than what it is.
Okay, just so to look at it from business perspective, Chintan, because now obviously you have all of this data and we're talking to you from perspective of what's happening in the industry and from job hiring. Just trying to understand that the fact is, as of this report, you are seeing muted hiring in the key catchment areas: retail, degrowth in retail, IT, banking, financial, like I mentioned. What does that mean in terms of an outlook for InfoEdge, for Naukri, for the business?
So you're right in observing that some of this catchment area, which used to be a large area, in the past, and there seems to be the growth is muted. But as I said, that the economy seems to be changing, and it is some of the other sectors that seems to be doing better. And this is just not for this quarter, or I'm seeing this trend for past few quarters. So some of the other sectors are becoming more important from the employment standpoint, and those seems to be growing. So which kind of offset the degrowth in some of the other key catchment areas. So overall, it still looks to us that we are on the trend line.
No. So when we say catchment areas, I'm assuming that a bulk of hirings are coming in from these sectors for you right now. And if you're saying that the trend is reversing, what does that then imply?
Yeah, but as I said, that it's also means that it's getting offset by some of the other areas,
Okay,
which seems to be growing much better, and we still hold the view that by December it would look even better. So our trend line, as I said, that initially I said that we are coming out of the U-curve recovery. That still seems to be holding true as far as the predictability for December goes.
Okay, Chintan, one last question, and I know we didn't plan this as an InfoEdge conversation, but I'm tempted to ask you, a reply only if you can. But Naukri derives a great share of revenue from IT services hiring, right? I'm just trying to understand, is the GCC pie large enough for a business to do okay, even if IT services demand is not, how do I say, completely salient right now? Just trying to think out loud.
Yeah. So partially, it is. GCCs would be about 10-12% of our overall kind of, revenue. So it's a significant part, but it will not completely offset, the entire IT services in a sector. However, the non-tech sector, which seems to be doing much better, and that would help us to kind of offset, the degrowth in some of the other sectors.
Okay, Chintan, appreciate you joining in. Lovely data points out there, and great to glean some of the insights from you on those. So thank you so much for your time today.